This podcast may contain explicit language. All right, we did not die today. I call that an unqualified success. Inside Out is next. Welcome to the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast, the show that uses a unique grading style to redefine what the greatest movies are. I'm Tom Duncan.
And I'm apparently Patton Oswalt's doppelganger, Dana Duncan.
You really got to let the YouTube comments go.
Says the person that when I walk into the room going, did you read the discourse? And then
you mean the Discord?
Discord, and then making a big deal of it before dinner.
A big deal. I pointed it out to you.
Then you came over and started razzing me a bit at the table.
Oh, yes, I razzed you. And how did I do that? I mentioned, did you see the Discord? You asked no. Then it was, well, we got another YouTube comment. Then you discussed it the entire ride over. There was no discussion over dinner. There was no razzing. There was no additional mentions of this. I just pointed it out because it's been a running gag. I'm not sure why it bothers you so much.
Okay, whatever.
Again, there are much worse people and celebrities you could be compared to than a famous liberal comedian.
True.
So as you will notice this evening, Michael Willoughby is not with us. He unfortunately had some scheduling conflict that could not be avoided, so it is just the two of us. So for anyone who's gotten really used to us having a guest on the show, you will be sadly disappointed that it is just the OG hosts back in the studio. And we are here to discuss Inside Out, as I mentioned before. For our 266th episode, we get deep into our emotions with Inside Out for its 10th anniversary. This originally came out in 2015. It was written and directed by Pete Docter with Meg LaFauve and Josh Cooley. Cinematography by Patrick Lynn and Kim White. Music by Michael Giacchino. Starring Amy Poehler as Joy, Phyllis Smith as Sadness, Richard Kind as Bing Bong, Bill Hader as Fear, Louis Black as Anger, Mindy Kaling as Disgust, Caitlin Diaz as Riley, Diane Lane as Mom, Kyle MacLachlan as Dad, Paula Poundstone as Forgetter Paula, and Bobby Moynihan as Forgetter Bobby. So, Dad, I know that our relationship with this movie is that we both saw it in theaters when it originally came out. It apparently came out over the Father's Day weekend in 2015. Do you remember anything about seeing it that first time?
I believe... No, I don't. Other than I know that we went as a family, but I don't even remember who all went.
Well, I remember you, me, and Mom. I don't know if anybody else went with us, but it's very possible both of my sisters would have been with us at that point.
Sarah might have been overseas because...
She very well could have been.
So I don't know if Allison was home and went with us. So she was in, would have been Stevens Point, I think, at the time.
As I mentioned, I only remember you, me, and Mom. Anybody beyond that, I have no recollection of. Now, my personal opinion on this movie, I have not seen it since it originally came out and we saw it in theaters. I thought it was very good. My one real criticism of the movie at the time is that I thought that the ending didn't relate well to children. I think that watching it again, I maybe don't have the same criticism because I guess going back to my original criticism, I thought that my biggest issue was the ending was too unclear. It was too opaque. It was not like spoon-fed in the way that normal children's movies are. And I know that's why critics love this movie and it rates very highly because it isn't spoon-fed and it's kind of geared more towards adults in that way. This movie is, you would say, it has an intended audience for children. And you would think that catering to them and helping them understand their emotions and things would be the purpose of the movie. So I guess I was a little surprised at the time that they didn't have a more profound and explained ending than it is.
I think you're selling children and their ability to understand and grasp things a little short.
Well, to be fair,
think,
I have spent very little time around children in the last 20 some years.
Okay, I think they're able to pick up on it much more and they get the purpose. If you're going to say this is a children's film, it is, but it is not a younger children's film, unless it's just for the animation. It's for the older children, the 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds. And they're going to pick up on this because they're living this. The younger kids will enjoy it for the humor and the visual aspects of the film, the cinematography, the way the characters are presented, etc. But the older kids are going to get more out of it. And I think that's who this is ultimately designed for, is the pre-pubescent children.
So probably like 8 to 12?
Yes. And I think they're going to get more out of it.
And that makes sense given who our protagonist is. That's basically what Riley is as a child, is right in that age range. You would think she's about 10, 11 years old, would be my guess. So that would make sense to a lot of this. But I think the film is obviously much more profound, much deeper than what you would normally see in a kid's movie. I think we too often pigeonhole animated films into they are only for children. And for me, this movie is much more universal as possibly an instructive tool, even though it's doing it through a creative medium and it's got cartoon characters and such, and everything is obviously dialed up. Like each of the emotions has an actor that will bring out the most expressive version of what that emotion is supposed to entail. And heightened reality is often played up towards children, but in a way, I still think that this was always designed much in the same way most Pixar films were, targeted towards children that have cute cartoon characters involved in them, and then have themes that can be accessible for adults.
Anybody who says cartoons are limited to children does not understand the meaning or the purpose of cartoons. You can go back into the 1940s with Warner Brothers. If you watch the early Chuck Jones Bugs Bunny cartoons,
the non-racist ones,
yeah, they're not children's cartoons. These were designed for adults to chuckle at too. I mean, there's a reason why the funny papers or the funny pages in the newspapers were always popular, and why you had television shows in the 60s such as the Flintstones and the Jetsons, which started having animated film or animated TV shows. And then going on, look at what we have now. We've had The Simpsons. What has it been on? 400 years or something like that?
It's like 34 now, but yeah.
Yeah, and Family Guy and American Dad and Bob's Burgers. It's not just for children. It just gives a little bit more opportunity to do things outside the norm than what normal sitcoms are allowed to do. So, no, it's not just for children. And in this particular case, the way it's designed is so that children, small children can enjoy it. Prepubescent children can gather information and understand things better. Even children going through puberty will have a better opportunity to understand their own emotions and such. And it gives added insight to some extent to parents going through this, because you have a child and you don't seem to always understand what they're thinking or feeling or what emotions will go through them, because in 1 minute they're the loving child you've always had, and the next minute they're railing against you going, "Oh God, you suck." And you have no idea what you did as a parent.
All right. Background for the movie. As we mentioned before, this was released over Father's Day weekend on June 19th, 2015, after originally having its premiere at the Cannes Film Festival. On a budget of $175 million, Inside Out would gross roughly $858 million and finish as the number 7 film of 2015. Now, as I have often questioned you, what is any of the 6 finishing ahead of it at the box office that year?
Boy, I'm trying to think back.
Most of them are either IP or sequels.
2015. That would have been in a sweet spot for Iron Man.
Okay.
Was that Iron Man 3?
No.
Oh.
Iron Man 3, I think, came out in 2013. You would have an Avengers movie that is ahead of this.
Okay.
And that was Avengers Age of Ultron. That was number 4 on the year.
Has to be a Harry Potter film.
No. Harry Potter had already finished. At least the main series. I don't know when all of the Fantastic Beasts and such movies came out.
Jason Bourne film?
Nope. That was the year prior. And I don't think that did very well, to be quite honest. That was always a series that was like for action fans. It was not necessarily a high marketed series. You ready to give up yet?
Wick?
No, John Wick has never been like a huge box office draw. I think the highest grossing one was number 4. All right, I'll give up.
I'll give up.
Number 10 was The Martian for $630 million. Then you had The Hunger Games Mockingjay Part 2 that was $653 million. You had Mission Impossible Rogue Nation at $682 million. Then this movie was at $858 million. Number 6, Spectre at $880 million. Now we get to the billion-dollar grossers. So at $1.1 billion, Minions. Then we already mentioned Avengers Age of Ultron. You missed on Furious 7, which was the one that Paul Walker, that was his last movie, and it was obviously a huge deal that year. $1.5 billion. You missed Jurassic World, which was the Chris Pratt version as that came out. That was $1.67 billion. And then one of the highest grossing movies, I think it's still inside the top 5, maybe it's moved down a little bit more. It's at least inside the top 10. And I think the highest grossing domestic film of all time, that would be Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens at $2 billion.
That I saw. But the rest of those, I never bothered to go.
Really? Because I remember watching Spectre with you.
Oh, excuse me, other than Spectre. Yes.
Yeah, you still haven't seen Rogue Nation, which I think is the best Mission Impossible film yet.
I know, I got to go back. I think the only Mission Impossible I've watched from beginning to end was the first one when it came out.
So of the top 10 this year, the ones I saw in theaters, I saw Force Awakens twice. I saw Age of Ultron in the theaters. I saw Spectre in theaters. I saw Inside Out. I saw Rogue Nation. And I saw The Martian in theaters that year. So like 5 or 6 of the top 10, which was a decent year for me at the time. This was like 2 years after I got out of undergrad.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving back into our background here. Inside Out received effusive critical acclaim at the time and was listed on many critics' top 10 lists in 2015. Inside Out would receive 2 Oscar nominations for, obviously, one Best Animated Feature, but do you know what the other nomination was for?
Screenplay. Best
Original Screenplay, yes. The National Board of Review and the American Film Institute named Inside Out one of the 10 best films of 2015. It also won the National Board of Review's Best Animated Film Award. According to Film and Philosophy, a philosophical journal, Inside Out is one of the best animated films ever made. Not shocking given the publication. Various other publications, such as IndieWire and the AV Club, have referred to Inside Out as a standout entry in the 2010s. A 2016 BBC poll of 177 film critics listed Inside Out as the 41st best film of the 21st century, and the New York Times placed it 7th on its own list. I think once you update those a little bit, it'll probably fall down a few spots, but even with the stuff we've had in the last 10 years, I don't know how far it's really falling. There are some obvious entries behind that I would say are ahead of it, like Oppenheimer and probably Get Out and such, but I still think this would place probably inside the top 75 at least.
Yeah, probably. I would. It'd be darn close if it fell out.
Yeah. The film screenplay was listed number 29 on the Writers Guild of America's 101 Greatest Screenplays of the 21st Century so far in 2021. Inside Out also had a sequel that released in 2024 that was the highest grossing film of last year. Inside Out currently holds a 98% among critics on Rotten Tomatoes, a 94 score on Metacritic, and a 3.8 out of 5 on Letterboxd. So, Dad, what do you think the film is about?
It is about understanding the inner emotional turmoil that exists within humans, that constantly various emotions rage against each other, and understanding what your reasoning is and what your basis of your emotions are, why you react to certain things a certain way. It's supposed to help you understand yourself better. It's a movie about self-reflection.
Simply put, this movie is about the ways in which emotions govern our lives, both good and bad. We do not necessarily associate our emotions with our memories, but it really creatively makes a causal link that I find to be very fascinating. When all of our memories could be perceived within one specific emotion, such as the first time we tried something disgusting. For you, that's pickles. For me, it's lima beans. That is obviously bringing up a green in this universe memory ball or whatever they're referring to it as in the world of Inside Out. Similarly, we have sad memories. I'm sure when your parents passed away, I'm sure when you were younger and had a breakup or something, those things are obviously weighing heavily and have some influence on those. But I do think that the way that this movie intertwines complex emotions, that they can all be intertwined, that sadness and joy can also be put together, that you can have joy and disgust at the same time, you can have anger and fear at the same time, and how it interweaves that we do not have to separate out. You do not necessarily have one emotion, but you have many of them all running together and running the switchboard of your life. I think, to me, that's what the movie is profound about.
Well, and in part, what people don't seem to understand is we have an ability many times to remember the best aspects of a memory and not remember the poor or bad parts of it. And I'll use an example. When your mother and I were first married and you were just born, we used to go after the Packer games and go on long walks through the cemetery near our house that we lived in. And that's some of my fondest memories. It was just quiet. It was her and I and you and your little bassinet or your stroller. And we would just walk in the cool fall. I remember that as being a very quiet, nice, wonderful time of togetherness as a family. But the reason we were doing it is because, quite frankly, starting out, we were dirt poor. We didn't have any money to do anything else. So walking around the outside was like a high point. And I tend to not to remember the reasons why that we had to do it. You remember instead the value of the memory that was established.
So, Dad, as we've been asking for a good portion of this season, do you like this movie?
I love this movie. I forgot how much I loved this movie when I saw it. It's a real tearjerker. I don't think you can be a parent and have watched your children grow up without choking up watching this film.
Yeah, I think I changed my Letterboxd rating. I was at a 4.5. I moved it to a full 5. I'm not sure what past me was necessarily thinking at the time, other than that one caveat of the ending to it. But I think this is a fantastic film. I think this is worthwhile to be watched at almost any age, and that you can find humor, you can find good spirits, you can find profoundness, you can find sadness, you can find nostalgia, a whole bunch of complex emotions in the heart of the film, because it's got so many universal themes that appeal to anybody who's basically struggled through life. We all have emotions, and I think that's the universality of this movie.
There's just nothing about this film that's problematic to me. I think they hit a home run.
So do you have a plot summary ready for us?
Yes. Inside Out takes place largely inside the mind of 11-year-old Riley as she navigates a difficult move from Minnesota to San Francisco. Her emotions, joy, sadness, anger, fear, and disgust, are personified and operate from headquarters, guiding her reaction and memories. When joy and sadness are accidentally swept out of headquarters, the remaining emotions struggle to manage Riley's turmoil. As Joy learns to appreciate the value of sadness, the film explores the complexity of growing up, emotional balance, and the importance of embracing all feelings.
I do think that is an important point to the film, is that each emotion has its own place within the larger breadth of anybody's field of humanity and what they perceive and how they experience the world around them. And if you don't have the full set, you're lost within this entire environment. It can completely change who you are.
How you handle or how you deal with emotions and how much control you have over certain aspects of emotions does make a difference. But again, it's just understanding that you're going to have all of these feelings on a daily basis and how those feelings motivate your behavior. That kind of understanding is important for any person to have if they're going to have a well-developed, happy, healthy life.
Well, did you know, Dad? According to director Pete Docter, each emotion is based on a shape. Joy is based on a star. Sadness is a teardrop. Anger is a fire brick. Fear is a raw nerve. And disgust is broccoli.
Yeah. I like that one.
He noted that he does like broccoli very much, however.
Broccoli is great when it's in cheese soup.
Broccoli's great, period, as long as it's, well, if it's like really raw and crunchy, then I need some sort of additive just to kind of get it out of its raw form. But you also, if you're going to steam it, which is the proper way to make broccoli, make sure that you've steamed it long enough. That's my one complaint with my grandmother's broccoli, and why I'm sure Ron has demanded that she put cheese on it at all times, is she undercooks or understeams the broccoli and the cauliflower all the time. It's always just a little bit raw.
I mean, I don't care for it at all raw. I love cauliflower raw. I love cauliflower raw more than I like it cooked.
Interesting.
But broccoli, never really enjoyed it. I'll eat it. I've gotten to the point where I actually eat it. It's not to the same level as a pickle for me, but I do enjoy it a lot more when it's like in a soup. When you make cream of broccoli or cheesy broccoli soup, I really like that. But I don't know.
Did you know, Dad? The writers considered up to 27 different emotions, but settled on the 5 we got: joy, sadness, disgust, fear, and anger, to make it less complicated. Some primary emotions that were cut included surprise, pride, and trust.
Ooh. Yeah. Trust would be a difficult one to convey in an adolescent.
I think fear kind of takes on the form of surprise. Pride is also a really difficult one to target towards children. I do think they ended up making the right choices here.
Yes, I think they probably did. I think they did a lot of right choices throughout this film.
All right. Did you know, Dad? Some memory balls in Riley's mind contain scenes from other Pixar movies, such as Carl and Ellie's wedding in Up from 2009.
I did not.
That is a movie you have yet to see, correct?
I have not seen Up.
We'll eventually get to it. I have a feeling. All right. Did you know, Dad? Originally, Joy would team up with Fear rather than Sadness. The creators thought that they would be a funnier pairing. They went with Sadness instead when Pete Docter was on a Sunday walk and then had a bad train of thought. He feared he'd get fired and lose his friends. Because of this, he realized Joy needed to know it was okay for Sadness to be at the controls occasionally. Now, working in concert with that, did you also know when Pete Docter and Jonas Rivera pitched the film to Mindy Kaling, she was moved to tears and said, "I think it's great that you guys are making a film that shows it's difficult to grow up and that it's okay to be sad about it." According to Pete Docter, they exclaimed, "Quick, write that down."
Yeah.
And finally, did you know, Dad, in Riley's classroom, number A113, a map at the back of the room has pins plotted at different places worldwide. They refer to all of where the Pixar movies are set.
I did not see that or know that. Wow.
I think it's an interesting Easter egg because there are some movies like The Incredibles. You would think it takes place in New York, but I don't think it ever specifically says it happens in New York. I know Cars, you get an idea of where that takes place because the original movie is he's traveling down Route 66. So that is somewhat grounded in a reality of sorts. But I don't know if we know where Andy's room is in Toy Story either.
And for our listeners, anybody know where Route 66 starts? Do you know where Route 66 starts?
It starts at the steps of the Chicago Art Museum.
Yep, on Michigan Avenue in Chicago.
Yes.
So that's where it starts, and then it travels down. It follows a lot of the same parts of the interstate, and it goes down through Illinois, or through across Illinois into Missouri, into Oklahoma, Texas Panhandle, across into New Mexico, Arizona, and I think it ends up in Los Angeles.
I believe you're right, yes.
Which is why this famous song Route 66 by Bobby Troup is a big deal, because it ends up being in Los Angeles. So,
well, that looks like a good spot for our first break. We'll be right back.
We're all getting fed up of endlessly scrolling for our next movie fix. So to get passionate about films again, join three movie mates on the Never Ending Watchlist movie podcast, where we take you on a movie journey as we seek to build the ultimate movie watchlist.
Seen all of those films are absolute bangers.
Yeah,
absolute bangers.
Bangers.
I applaud you again, sir.
We deep dive specific movies to find out facts, theories, and funny takes, and ultimately decide whether a movie is worthy of being on the watchlist.
I can't recommend this film.
Oh! We'll debate top fives, rank directors' movies, and interview film fans just like you.
And she is an incredibly complex villain. She's fierce, she's immovable.
So whether you're a casual movie fan or hardened cinephile, we've got plenty for you to enjoy.
I got outvoted by the guy who chose the movie for this episode.
Join me, Damon Carter, Alex Hall, and Cam Young on the Never Ending Watchlist movie podcast every week on Podcast Everywhere.
It's easier to find Cameron on Facebook than it is to find a plot in existence. Right, anyway, for now, it's farewell to Alex.
Before we jump back into the episode, next week for our 267th episode, we welcome back our most frequent guest, Christine Duncan, to discuss another Billy Wilder classic and Best Picture winner with The Apartment from 1960, celebrating its 65th anniversary. Written and directed by Billy Wilder with I.A.L. Diamond, cinematography by Joseph Lachelle, music by Adolph Deutsch, starring Jack Lemmon, Shirley MacLaine, Fred McMurray, Ray Walston, and Edie Adams. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's ReelGood. All right, Dad, we left off at Best Performance. Who did you have down?
It's hands down for me, Peter Docter, both writer and director. And shout out to Meg LaFleur and Josh Cooley as co-writers.
So a couple of nomen infractus pieces there. First, it's Pete, not Peter, and it's Meg LaFauve, not LaFleur. But yes.
LaFauve?
Yeah. Now, Pete Docter is credited as being not only one of the co-creators of the story and then an official writer on the script. I think the other two were brought in to help with some of the dialogue. And I think for the most part, this was like his brainchild, pun intended, I suppose. But yes, I would agree. It's Pete Docter, hands down. The creativity throughout this entire movie, the tone it sets, the emotional... I'm trying to think. It's kind of like... a really great symphony. It rises and falls in all the right spots, and it doesn't like leave you too emotionally drained in one spot, and it doesn't leave you overly sappy. It gets a good mixture of all the right pieces at the right time. And I do think, in addition to creating and controlling the tone and how everything would look and all of the things that he had to kind of birth and create for this, the casting is extraordinary. The music quality is high and on par, but to be quite honest, Michael Giacchino had already established himself by this point, especially even with Pixar. So it's not really to be surprised. Pete Docter has created some of the best movies for Pixar, or at least been a significant part of some of them, especially after the John Lasseter era. But yeah, it's absolutely him as number one for me.
It kind of reminds me a little bit, was you're talking about symphonies, the scene from Amadeus where, and I can't remember the character's name, but it's F. Murray Abraham. Salieri plays his piece, and then Mozart goes, well, it's good. And then he adds to it and changes it, makes it even better. And he goes, my God, he did make it better. And that I see all the time throughout this, which is, this could have been a very average production by anybody else. I think he took it to a higher level than anybody else did or could have.
Best secondary performance for you?
I have Amy Poehler.
Wow, 2 for 2. I do too.
I think she carries a wide range on here. I think her personality in general of what you see in her comedy and on her work and performance in movies and television mirrors the level of energy she has in being Joy. And I think it was a great stroke of casting, even though she was the last person, I believe, picked or cast for that position.
I agree. I think all of the emotions are very well cast. Again, going back to what I said earlier, I think they're all capable of the cartoonish elements where they're overplaying each of the characters, but each of those personalities and what they're kind of known for in popular culture has a personification with each of those different elements. Bill Hader is associated with fear because of the Stefan character and how he covers his mouth regularly. Louis Black is obviously a very famous comedian for his angry rants. Amy Poehler made her name on Parks and Recreation after she was on SNL, but the Parks and Recreation character of Leslie Knope is an eternal optimist, full of optimism and joy and hope and stars and rainbows constantly. And that's what this character is. I guess the only one you could say is maybe an outlier, but it's just because of the tenor of her voice, is Phyllis Smith, who never in The Office was like the particular sad sack in the way that sadness is in this movie. But the way that her voice warbles in such a way, it just denotes a certain level of, oh, woe is me, kind of almost Eeyore-like.
I know. I mean, she wasn't sure she was going to work or be good at it, from what I understand. But when they heard her speak, I mean, she's the one character that really didn't have to do a voice per se. They just said, read the lines like you would if you were just using your normal voice.
Going back to Amy Poehler, I think she is prime casting in this central role. She's obviously used to being a lead and doing certain levels of narration, both at her time on SNL, but then also somewhat to her Parks and Recreation career. And I do think that she's got to carry a lot of this movie, obviously not only being the central character, but she's going through the primary protagonistic arc, even though you could also say Riley is somewhat also the protagonist in this. But Joy has to come out and experience that other emotions have a purpose. And specifically, she notes early on in the film, and it creates what the conflict is, that sadness, she doesn't know what sadness's purpose is. And that's becomes the revolving conflict which has to be solved for the plot to move forward in this movie. But she's got to, in order to understand sadness, she, by the end of the film, has to be sad herself. And so even though this joyful, happy, optimistic character is there, she has to experience a certain depth of emotion herself that has to be brought to the forefront to really sympathize and understand what it is to be the other emotions for this movie to resolve. Now, 3, 2, 1. Most charismatic award, Lewis Black.
I thought seriously about it, and I said, no, I'm going to go different.
Okay, well, I went with Lewis Black. I took the low-hanging fruit on this one. Because,
well, it's too easy.
Yeah. I mean, I could have easily gone with Bill Hader on this one. I actually think Phyllis Smith did a fantastic job being charismatic as Sadness, but Lewis Black is, just on another level for us, and he appeals to us going back to a relationship that's probably 20 years old, back in the early Daily Show days, back in the Bush era. But God, it's the perfect casting of anger.
I know, and I got your sister took me for my birthday, I believe, to see Lewis Black and Madison live, and I mean, he's just awesome. I bought a bobblehead that sits on my desk. You push the button, and he rants for about 20 seconds. Different rants. It's great. Anyway. No, my most charismatic is Richard Kind.
Yeah, I wondered if you were going to go there.
This guy just floors me. Okay. First of all, he has this ability to convey innocence and mischief by just his voice. Yet when you talk or listen to an interview he does, he's got friends. One of his best friends is George Clooney. Another one of his best friends is Mel Brooks. He also hangs around with Nick Kroll. He goes out to dinner with, he's like everywhere in Hollywood and New York. He knows everybody. He's been on Broadway. He's been on TV. He considers Michael J. Fox one of his close friends from when they did the TV show where they were in the mayor's office. And I can't remember the name of the show off the top of my head.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you that.
I mean, the guy has got connections everywhere. And whenever he gets a part, he always seems to be able to knock it out of the park. I don't know.
He's a very much that guy. Whether he's appearing in random episodes of Scrubs as a hypochondriac, or he's appearing in Only Murders in the Building last season where he has the eye patch for some reason, or any number of
changing.
Things. Yes. Because apparently he had pink eye.
Yes.
But he's just a great character actor. He's known exactly what his role is. He's never going to be a leading man. But he fits in to so many different nooks and crannies by just being playful and energetic. And that definitely comes off here. It's an emotional moment in the movie when Bing Bong says goodbye, essentially.
Yeah. And I think it comes out that way. I mean, this is a guy that seems to get along with everybody. He's got friends everywhere. And his presentation shows that. That's the ultimate, in my opinion, in being charismatic.
Let's move to best scene then. I have 5 nominees here. I have new core memory, which is the point at which the sadness marble or memory ball is created. And we obviously have the commotion that ends up with joy and sadness being shipped out to long-term memory. Then I have dinner conversation, which should be somewhat self-explanatory. Then I have Goodbye Bing Bong, the scene we just talked about for a brief moment there. I have Joy recognizes sadness, which is when Joy specifically recognizes the value of sadness and what her purpose is. And then finally, the climax of the movie, Riley comes home, where there's this reconciliation and she kind of allows herself to be sad. And we have this sharing of purpose of everything that we've learned up to this point in the movie coming to a head in that moment. To you, what is the best scene in the movie?
Joy recognizes sadness.
Okay.
I think it really shows how the emotions interplay and how actually joy can't exist without sadness.
Yes, they're not just polar opposites, but two halves of a whole.
Yeah, I mean, you don't understand pure joy until you've had total sadness.
I would think most would call that despair, but fair.
Whatever, however you want to put it, but I think that's ultimately what we're talking about. So I think that scene is the most memorable. I think and that's why I'm going to just say it in advance, it's my most indelible. I think it just plays out beautifully and really, to me, is the pinnacle of the film.
See, to me, I would go with the final climax of the film and Riley comes home, just because it rewards you for all the journey that you've been through up to this point. She's obviously gotten off the bus. She has the breakdown. She confesses to her parents. And I think for me, the emotional swell of that moment, where it's not just that joy is now recognized sadness's value, but rewards that catharsis in us and her in that moment, at letting her into the controls, pulling out the light bulb, etc., and kind of letting us work through our emotions in that moment. To me, I'm so worked up because of the rest of the movie getting to that point by that climax. And if it were not for that climax, I don't know if this movie is as good as it is. Like, joy recognizes sadness is a very important link in the chain, as are fairly all of these moments here. But I just think that one is the payoff for everything else that we've been building to in this moment. Now, I will say, just on a honorable mention basis, I would also say the second best, in my opinion, is Goodbye Bing Bong. Just because, again, we're led to believe Bing Bong no longer has a purpose in life, that Riley has left him behind. And realistically, he's stuck around, or he's still in the memory banks, just so that he can have one last purpose, which is to get joy out of the memory dump and back into just regular long-term memory to save Riley. So I find that to be incredibly profound, that he found his purpose yet again in this moment to help save her. And I think that's why it's probably my favorite scene of any of these, because even though there's the emotional swell of Riley comes home, I do also think that may work to, it's not one that I would revisit by itself, but there's just enough of a reward and a payoff with a little bit of sadness, as opposed to the more emotionally swelling moment at the end in the Goodbye Bing Bong scene, that it would be my favorite.
It's my favorite also, and the reason is that I truly believe that sometimes the sad moments, or the difficult moments, or the stressful moments of your life when you're an adolescent, can be quieted and improved by just reflecting sometimes on some innocent aspect of your childhood, a moment where you felt calm or loved or good about yourself. And so I think that's ultimately what Bing Bong is doing in this particular case.
All right, you gave your most indelible moment so far. And like you, I have my best scene as also my most indelible moment, and that would be the climax to the film, that she comes home, she has this reconciliation, the emotions are back in control, but they're all sharing in the uniformity of what it is, the full breadth of experience as a human being, and we have this catharsis moment. So for me, that's the thing that I remembered most. Having 10 years in between these two watchings of the film, when it first came out and now, that I really remembered, or that stuck with me. So that looks like a good spot for our second break. We'll be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, and before we get to the Stanley Rubric in a minute, if you're ever curious about our Master Greatest Movies of All Time list that has every graded movie we've ever discussed on the show, there's a link in the episode description of every episode of this show, or you can go to RonnieDuncanStudios.com and find it as the top entry on the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast show page. That has the grades we've done so far for all 240 movies we've graded, and we continue to add more each week. Make sure to check that out as we go and follow along. Dad, do we have anyone to remember this week?
We have a rather long list. Frederick Forsyth, 86, English novelist, wrote The Day of the Jackal, The Odessa File, and The Fourth Protocol. I believe all three of those were made into films. Sly Stone, 82, American Hall of Fame musician, Sly and the Family Stone, and songwriter, Everyday People and Family Affair. Arthur Hamilton, 89, American songwriter. Songs included Cry Me a River and I Can Sing a Rainbow. Jason Constantine, 55, American film executive for Lionsgate Films and producer of franchises Saw, John Wick, and The Expendables. Brian Wilson, 82, American Hall of Fame musician. The Beach Boys, songwriter of Good Vibrations, and record producer, Pet Sounds. Harris Yulin, 87, American actor. Scarface, Clear and Present Danger, Ozark.
Training Day and Ghostbusters and a lot of other things.
If you saw his picture, you'd go, oh, that guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, he's been on tons of things throughout the last 40 years.
I have this like lasting image of him as like a cop or something in some movie, and I can't think of what it is, but for whatever reason, he's like, I definitely see him as that. We also had two other entries today that I'd like to highlight here. Maurice Wipani, 61, New Zealand actress, known for her roles in Soldier Soldier and Xena Warrior Princess, which I think is the more widely known or commonly known thing here in the United States, since I believe Soldier Soldier is a British TV show or something to that effect. And then finally, Ananda Lewis, 52, American TV host of MTV's Total Request Live and Hot Zone. She also, I think at one time, was a video DJ as well for MTV. So obviously the few names that stick out, we talked about Harris Yulin for a second here. The two musicians that we lost, both within a few days of each other at roughly the same age, 82, Sly and the Family Stone, and Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys. The two obvious entries here. People have loved their music for a long time. I know there were people that, especially on our shared Discord with a lot of our fellow Cinepodcasters, were lamenting that both of these passed away, and certainly putting on their music and their songs that we'd been kind of bandying about back and forward. But yeah, it's definitely a couple of big losses again this week.
And I note that we've lost a few people who were relatively young. So,
you mean in their 50s?
Yes.
I see. Yeah, I suppose Jason Constantine, 55. I don't know what personal effect he had on all of these franchises, but as one of the primary film executives, and I want to say at one time he was like the head of Lionsgate Films, he must have had something to do with all three of these major franchises, Saw, John Wick, and The Expendables. And I know that Lionsgate has been trying to sell itself for quite some time now without really any great success, but certainly it's out there, and he must have had a major hand in that as well. So again, definitely some big losses this week. And so we remember them here all fondly with a moment of silence in their honor. Thank you. All right, let's move to best funniest lines. I will start with sadness. Crying helps me slow down and obsess over the weight of life's problems.
Joy. Oh no, these facts and opinions look so similar. Bing bong. Don't worry about it. Happens all the time.
Anger. Congratulations, San Francisco. You ruined pizza. First the Hawaiians and now you.
And you already did this in the beginning of the show, but all right. Or fear. All right. We did not die today. I call that an unqualified success.
Anger. We should lock the door and scream that curse word we know. It's a good one.
I didn't have anything else.
I have two small ones here.
Yeah.
Disgust, which is directly leading into the next film, let's say. What's puberty?
Yeah.
And then sadness. Remember the funny movie where the dog died? All right. So let's move to the Stanley rubric then. Legacy is up first. This is a measure of the legacy of the film roughly 5 years after it came out. So 2020 to today, what is the legacy of this film as shared between the industry and the audience at large? 5 and 5 points each for a total of 10. Would you like to go first or second?
I'll go second.
I have this at a 4.5 and a 4.5. I think the industry recognizes its place, but doesn't give it full credit. Given that it was the top finisher last year, but it was also a sequel, it's definitely IP that people relate to, but is it the top rated Pixar movie that kids in this current era are really singing the praises of, or that they like are lining up to go see? You could say that. I don't think it's quite to the level of a 5, though. Like, even as the top finishing movie last year in Inside Out 2 and the overwhelming support that that movie got, I just am not quite ready to give it a 5. But on the industry side, I'm also not ready to give it quite a 5 on that either. So I have it at a 4.5 and a 4.5 for a 9.
I think that recency bias somewhat comes into this because it's only 10 years old. And I'll talk about that more later. But I'm close. I have 4.5 for the industry because I think it did lead to the sequel. There was at least one other, I think, direct-to-video release in there about one of the sub-characters.
I mean, it's more like direct-to-streaming in this era, but sure.
Yeah. Public. I'm at a 4. And the only reason I'm saying that is because if you walked up to somebody just out of the blue and say, name 3 Pixar films, you're going to get Toy Story or Toy Story 2. You're going to get Cars. You're going to get Up. I don't think this is going to be in that 3 very often.
Boy, I don't know. I mean, I know you're forgetting a few films in between there, like obviously The Incredibles or Finding Nemo. And It's a joy of riches. But again, there's like this divide, that early portion of Pixar where it was the Toy Stories 1, 2, and 3. And you had Finding Nemo, and you had Monsters, Inc., and you had The Incredibles, and you had Ratatouille, you had even WALL-E or Up. That's all within like a 15-year period. And then after that, there was a dead period in between this movie and even Up. There's like a 6-year gap. And even after that, some of the Pixar favorites are not necessarily like up near the top. The only one that I can think of in recent memory that really hit, I guess Coco's kind of in there, but Soul obviously won the Oscars in 2020. And outside of that, I don't know if there are a lot of other ones that hit. So if you're talking about recency, especially with the sequel coming out last year, there is a possibility, depending on the age range of who you're asking, that would come out and say something about it. To be fair, in our straw poll of The Office this week, I think we had near universal hands for almost everyone seeing this movie.
No, it was not. It was only about 70%.
I thought it was closer to like 85, 90%.
Nope, it was about 70%.
Because even Alexis said, man, I've even seen that one. I actually saw that one. Now, she has small children, so it's natural that she would have.
Yes.
But yeah.
So.
All right. So we're at an 8.75 average between the two of us. Impact and significance, then, that is a measure of the impact and significance of this movie within the 5 years after it came out. So 2015 to 2020 was the impact and significance of this film as felt between the industry and the audience. Again, 5 and 5 points for a total of 10. Would you like to go first or second here, Pop?
I'll go first this time. For the industry, I have the same 4.5. It's the same rationale of what's been going on. It's been consistent for the last 10 years. For the public, this was a home run. I mean, the amount of money that it generated and such, and the impact it had and the comments and such, I'm giving it a 5 for the public. So I'm at a 9.5 overall.
All right. This is going to be a wide gap of variation between the two of us because I have a 4 and a 4 for an 8.
Okay.
My reasoning is that in the moment, you could say that it kind of swept all of the precursor awards and the Oscars and the industry and such. But I don't know if anybody really felt that a Inside Out 2 was like something that was easily that was going to be on the radar for Pixar immediately, in the same way that like a Cars 2 came out really quickly afterward. Or even Toy Story 2 was only like 4 years after the original Toy Story. Some of the sequelness of it, I don't think was necessarily baked in. And there is a residual, well, how much did kids really like this movie? Because there is a little bit of a gap where it's like the little kids, did they really like all the cute little emotions and such? And that was proven out last year by having the sequel. do as well as it did, is somewhat of a proof of concept. But until that point, I don't know if the industry or the audience necessarily was effusive. Yes, the critics were all there. They all loved this. They shared in it at the moment. But then it was like, all right, 2015, what about the 4 years after it? If we're really treating this as a 5-year collective, it did not support anybody's newer career. It kind of established that Pete Docter is clearly the number one guy at Pixar, but now he's pulling massive duty as the CEO currently after the whole John Lasseter thing and the fallout from that about 5 years ago. And I don't think he's directly had his hand in making one of their movies since. And there's really, I mentioned the 2 other films that were extremely, if you could say, popular that have come out from Pixar since that point, save for Inside Out 2 this last year, was Soul and Coco. But it's not like they were hitting home runs on every one like they had been at that point. So I just have a little bit more of a removed, is this something that was like really huge, or was this something that was, it was big, but it wasn't quite that big? And that's why I have 4 and 4 for my 8. Now, that would also place it at an 8.75 average between the two of us as the last category. And given the recency of this movie, 10 years, I really don't think that that's that unusual to basically have the legacy and the impact be the same in this short time frame.
Yeah.
But let's move to novelty. This is a measure of anything original about the movie at all, and then how well they execute on the movie as a whole. So that's 5 and 5 points as well for a total of 10. I will just say I have 5 and 5 for both of these. I think this is highly novel and creative. I think it's very original with all the concepts that they birthed out. Like, all of it makes sense. It's like, why didn't I think of that? It's so simple, but it creatively is so satisfying to me. And then I think on an execution level, this is operating at possibly the best that Pixar has probably ever produced in a single movie. If you're asking start to finish, like, it's, for me, WALL-E, this, and probably Toy Story 3 are the conversation for what's the best Pixar movie. So I'm at a 10.
I'll concur. The way I would describe this as far as novelty and execution, I would say the following, which is Looney Tunes meets Freud.
Okay. I don't disagree with that description, I suppose.
Where else would there be anything close to this? I mean,
all right.
And so as far as execution itself, I mean, it struck every note perfectly, so I'm at a 10.
All right. As far as classicness, which will be our next category here, classicness is just really a measure how well is the film aged or not. In the 10 years that we've had, I think it's aged beautifully. I think it's very profound on a lot of universal themes. It's somewhat ahead of its time on talking about your emotions, being a teaching tool for kids. I think that it could very well, in a near future, once it hits about 25 years, be a 10. The only thing it's missing is the benefit of time, so I have a 9.
I'm at an 8.5 for the same reason. And it's the only thing I can say that there's a lack of classicness is because the group that it's speaking to starts to age very quickly. So it doesn't speak the same to each group as it goes through. So it loses a little bit of its timelessness because it speaks differently to different age groups, if that makes any sense exactly. So I'm giving it a half point down for that because just by its general nature, it's not going to speak the same to every group. Each group, as it watches the film, each age is going to get a new experience from it, and it's going to mean something different to a different group, and probably less to somebody in their high school, college years than it's going to mean to a parent or to an adolescent. So I'm at an 8.5.
So that would, again, bring us to an 8.75 average between the two of us. Rewatchability, take whatever subjective test you want to insert here. Do you want to go first or second?
I'll go second.
If I were to create an objective measure for this, again, This is another relatively short Pixar movie. I want to say it's only like 90-ish minutes. It might be like 92 to 96, somewhere in that range. So it's not terribly long. It holds your attention for the most part. It's got lovable characters, really good casting. I think the writing is excellent in this. I think that it doesn't have any real dull moments. It doesn't have any real detractions for me per se. It's a very easy watch, and it can be enjoyed by pretty much all ages. So for me, I'm going to go with a 9 here.
For me, this is not going to be something that I'm going to go to on a regular basis. There's going to have to be a reason or purpose for me to go to it. It's going to have to be me showing it to somebody who's younger or somebody who's going through parenting issues or something. Every once in a while, I may put it on for something entertaining and enjoy. So I can't go any higher than an 8.
All right. So we did finally break our 8.75 streak for an 8.5. However, for audience score, we had an 86% for Google users and an 89% for Rotten Tomato users, giving us, you guessed it, an 8.75.
Yes.
All right, so to recap the categories, we had an 8.75 for Legacy. We had an 8.75 for Impact and Significance. We had a 10 for Novelty, an 8.75 for Classicness, an 8.5 for Rewatchability, and an 8.75 for Audience Score, giving us a final total of 53.5, and currently placing it on our list between High Noon and The Godfather Part 2 for number 16, and 2 slots ahead of Toy Story as the top-rated animated and Pixar film in our library. So there you go. Well done. So, with that, if you have any complaints on our scoring, if you have any commentary for us, if you want to ask us questions about anything at all, please write us at greatestaltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on any of our socials at GMOAT Podcast, GMOAT Podcast, or you can find us at RonnieDuncanStudios.com/GMOAT Podcast. And all of those tags and websites and everything else are in the show notes for you to find there. All right, let's move to remaining questions. I only have one. What is Mr. Anderson's job? He's moving from Minnesota to San Francisco. The obvious thing, because he's talking about an investor, is that he's in some sort of tech startup, would be my guess.
Yes, he's starting a computer animated film company. Mr. Anderson is Pete Docter.
Well, it's Kyle MacLachlan, and Pete Docter voices some other character in the
I understand, but he wrote that character to be basically him.
Yeah, I could see it. But otherwise, I don't have any other remaining questions. Did you?
No, not really.
I think this movie does a great job of closing the loop.
Yeah.
Even though it sets up the second movie and you can see the natural progression from Inside Out 1 to Inside Out 2, especially, I really should let you sit down and watch Inside Out 2. I thought it was very good. I think it's pretty close to equal to the original movie, but I'll let you decide for yourself. But the natural progression going from, you're in your preteens to your actual teens, the puberty years, and all the other emotions that are added in.
Not to mention all the emotions that are added to you by others.
Yeah, well, parents aside.
Wasn't talking parents.
Okay. Anyway, well, then let's move to remaining thoughts for the week.
I don't have a whole lot other than I haven't done anything new other than you started watching The Pit, and I started watching some of it, and it is really good. It is really compelling. I've not seen every episode or all of the episodes. I've seen parts of several and some complete. And I'm really looking forward to at some point here shortly going back and starting from episode 1 again.
So you did mention this last week already, and that was your whole trope was you were waiting for mom to come back to basically watch it from episode 1. I will say that I did finish it last week. It is riveting. I am looking forward to, I believe the next season comes out in January, but it's going to be more episodic releases. So I caught it after everything had been released, so I could binge all 15, I think, episodes all at the same time, but I'd have to watch it more episodically like normal release television, which I'm okay with doing because it's a very, very good show. I will also say I caught up on Abbott Elementary for the season on this one as well. Just another good, wholesome show that is light, available TV watching, and the characters I think have rounded into exactly who you need to be by the end of, I think it's either the third or fourth season by this point. It's just a fun show. I'm still trying to catch on to Andor. I know I got to kind of slog through the first couple of episodes before it really gets into the heart of this second season, and I'm hoping to do that here pretty soon, but we're also slowly but surely running out of time on the availability or the amount of weeks we have available to try and catch the rest of this 1982 fair and the prep that goes into all of that. So we do have a few of those to rewatch. We have some busy times. It's going to be a busy summer. We did also catch 2 more Bond films this last weekend, so we will continue trying to plug along. I think we are now past the halfway point of trying to watch these through chronologically. And so we have like 11 more films, I think, left to go before we get to the final James Bond film. The one that you and I have not watched since we watched it in theaters. I think that's No Time to Die Again. And we will be able to bring you our live show of rankings on our YouTube channel. So be on the lookout for that as well.
I will also point out that we're talking about our 1982 film watching. I put together a list of films to watch. There were 45 on my list. 19 of them I saw in theaters. 11 I saw an early release on HBO. So 30 out of 45 films I had seen either at release or within the 6 to 12 months after the release. So I guess back in 1982, I was watching a lot of film.
Oh, that's precisely what I would say about the year 2008. Originally, I was supposed to come on and do 2008 in the first season of Revisionist Almanac, but because it was supposed to be the Christmas episode and somebody wanted a little bit more time for their holidays so they didn't have to edit quite as much, we skipped over that to do 1967 instead. So eventually, coming back around, someone will owe me the year 2008 so that I can make The Dark Knight finally get its Best Picture at least nomination. It's deserved nomination. But yeah. So I think that's a good spot to stop for this week. We appreciate you all stopping by and spending some time with us. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week. When you're in love with a married man, you shouldn't wear mascara. Next week, for our 267th episode, we welcome back our most frequent guest, Christine Duncan, to discuss another Billy Wilder classic and Best Picture winner with The Apartment from 1960, celebrating its 65th anniversary. Written and directed by Billy Wilder with I.A.L. Diamond. Cinematography by Joseph Lachelle. Music by Adolf Deutsch. Starring Jack Lemmon, Shirley MacLaine, Fred McMurray, Ray Walston, and Edie Adams. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. Please like, follow, rate, and review, or whatever on whichever platform you have so that more can join in our fun. You can also email the show at RonnieDuncanStudios.com or at greatestaltimemopodcast@gmail.com, or find us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd, or TikTok at the handle @GMOPodcast. The Greatest Movie of All Time is a production of Ryan Duncan Studios. Our show is mixed, edited, and written by Thomas Duncan. Our music is thanks to Purple Planet Music. Our distributor is Captivate FM. Our technical provider is Riverside FM.